All right. So, Jason Cutter, you are joining me today. I appreciate it. We've talked a lot about sales. I love talking about sales. I was a terrible salesman when I was little and I was young coming out of college and then law school. And I was like, I got to learn this stuff. But before we jump into your background and everything, I was looking, you are fittingly so, you were a marine biology major, which totally makes sense when it comes to sales. Out in California, you have um, been, I guess you also have an MBA, right? So that gets us into sales. And then you also host your own podcast, right? You said the Authentic Persuasion Show,
Yep.
which people can find online. So I thank
Yeah.
you for joining me. And we've been online with a bunch of things where you've been speaking. I love your stuff. I've been looking through your book. I haven't read the whole book, but I got so many books from so many guests. You probably have the same thing.
I
I'm
do.
like, they're like reference guides for me, right? You like look through them, make notes and stuff like that. So, and I want to get into things like the common mistakes, that sales professionals make and things like that. But why don't you tell me about before the marine biology stuff, a little bit your background and where you're from, where you grew up.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I love having these conversations. I love being here. I'm excited that we've made this happen.
Yes, make some
So
good content, share some good ideas, right?
yeah, well, and help people who might be on the same path or have gone down similar paths that I was on. I mean, it's one of those things where kind of more of the punchline is I was always embarrassed and afraid to talk about the path that I had been on because it was such a, I'll say it, a hot mess. And so yeah, so as a kid, I was a shy, awkward, bullied, late blooming only child, still an only child. That part hasn't changed. The other parts have moderately changed.
It'd be kind of weird if it
Um,
changed, right?
yeah, I don't get bullied as much anymore. And
I did meet a
to
guy whose
handle
dad died and he discovered he had like 8 brothers and sisters he never knew about.
what?
So I
Yeah,
hopefully that won't happen to you.
I don't think that'll happen. I'm not ever discounting anything. I'll never say never, but I'm
Ding
pretty
dong.
sure
Yeah.
I would know. My parents are still together, and I was the product of two analytical parents. So my parents, great, wonderful, nurturing, supportive parents. My mom was a banker and in finance. My dad was in engineering and project management and leadership, and they worked their way up in careers without college degrees. Back in that baby boomer era, and then I came along. And so it was a very analytical household. And then also, as a result of that, plus one of my mom's first jobs, which was working at a furniture store in the back office and listening to the comments and the things that the salespeople said
Right.
after, selling people stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very flattering.
The behind
Pretty
the
much a
scenes
house.
comments you're saying. The behind the scenes
Yeah, just
comments.
all those like I got him to pay this and I ripped him off for that. All those classic
Thin men. Yeah, the
backroom
old
stuff.
now can I ask you a question? You
Yeah,
said your parents are both professionals, but none of them went to college. So how was
neither
your
of them
dad
did.
an engineer?
So he was in the Navy for 4 years and then got a job and then literally worked his way up. So he took his
Got it.
his Navy expertise, his nuclear power engineering experience that he did from working on ships, and
Wow.
parlayed that into 39 years at a research engineer company, working his way up.
Okay. That answered the
And then
question.
my mom took the bookkeeping skills that she got from the furniture store and parlayed that into working at a bank and then working for a city government. And so, yeah, so then
Nice.
I was the one that is to go to college. But yeah, growing up, my parents, especially my mom, strong dislike, let's just say hate for salespeople. And that's what I was handed. That's what I was
Right. Well, that's the
around.
impression we all get. That's what the media does. That's what movies do.
And anytime you go to buy something where there's commissions and incentives involved, like buying a car, that was the
Oh, they
experience we
must be
had
taking
as a
advantage of
kid.
me. Right. Why wouldn't anybody
Every
take advantage of me? Right.
Yeah, and every 2 years when we'd buy a new car, it was just a long drawn out battle at the dealership. I remember many Sundays spent in watching a crappy TV in a room that smelled like tires and stale
Yeah.
coffee,
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
for
That
my
was
parents to battle them.
the
Yeah,
worst experience buying a car. That's an
that's
industry that
it.
needs some major training and regulation.
Yeah, well, and the indicator for that industry, if anyone doesn't believe that, is the fact that you can now buy a car through an app from a vending machine and have it delivered without dealing with a human. That should tell you how bad your industry is with a reputation.
Yeah. That people realize that people really don't want to deal with
That's
the
it.
salespeople.
That's it. Yeah. So, given all that background, given my childhood, and given that analytical nature, I chose marine biology and sharks over people as the direction I wanted to go with life,
Right.
which is interesting.
That
And
was
that
safer
didn't
for you,
work
right?
out.
Sharks
It
instead of
was
people.
safer, much more reliable. Sharks have one thing on their mind. They go one direction. You just
Right.
watch out for the business end and you'll be okay. Humans are much less predictable.
That's pretty funny, but it's true, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Okay. And you grew up in California, or is that
I
just where
did.
you
So
went to school?
no, grew up in
Oh,
the Bay Area, then went to UC Santa Cruz. Marine biology, it was way too popular, and it wasn't really my calling. So I ended up moving to Washington State. I worked at Microsoft for a couple years doing tech support, thinking I wanted to get into computers. That also wasn't something I cared about. I realized in there, we all lost our jobs at that point. It's when they started outsourcing to overseas, China and India. For
right.
some of us, like you and I, we remember when it was actually done in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people. And then it moved, and I was happy with that because I didn't want to do it anymore. Ended up, just falling into a job in the mortgage business at age 27, which was technically my first sales job, but it was the housing boom. Everyone wanted to buy a house. It was pure order taking, and
Right.
kind of started me off in sales. But it wasn't for maybe about 6 years later that I considered myself a salesperson.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people don't. Well, look, I mean, to a certain extent, we're all salespeople. A lot of people don't want to consider themselves salespeople. So did you go get your MBA after that?
I did. So I went from the mortgage business to helping people who are in foreclosure to leading teams in various debt related uh, verticals, helping people who had credit card debt get into, programs to manage that. I've
Yeah.
always been on the service side, selling services and helping people in some way, no matter
Right.
what it's been.
Yeah.
I've never sold products, and I've never been interested in selling things that people
Not even
don't need to
intangible
buy.
products like insurance and things like that. Nothing. Always been
You
services.
that kind of stuff where it's in the service intangible product, but not a physical product.
Right. Not like a
I
car.
think that'd be, yeah, not like a car or a
Right.
washer and dryer.
Right.
That seems too easy to me, because then you can actually see it and be like, yeah, I like that. That's good.
Well, that's the right. That's like I grew up in the life insurance business. My dad was in insurance in the mid 60s. I mean, that is a sales business. I mean, you can't, it's something that nobody wants until they can't get it. And it's a long haul, and you got to qualify and all that kind of stuff. If you could put somebody in a car with the leather and all the lights I mean, come on, you can't even
New
beat
car
that.
smell. There's no new life insurance smell that
No,
just
they
really
don't have that in a
turns
bottle.
everybody on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's something we should work on. We could
Should
partner
work
on
on it.
that.
I've never thought of that before until this moment, but that's what you need. You need that new insurance smell, that new attorney smell. Oh, this is a great smell. I'm going to get this new attorney.
Could you imagine? So I know you speak to a lot of insurance groups and stuff. You go speak to these guys and be like, listen, on your way out, we have a table here. You can buy your new life insurance smell. And I'm telling you, like
It's
pheromones,
good.
you'll sell like hotcakes.
It'll take you back to your very first life insurance policy and what your life was like. That's what it'll
Right,
smell like.
exactly. You can
Yeah.
reminisce. That's so funny.
Yeah, so I was in sales leadership, and then I switched to actually managing outside offices who were essentially affiliate / franchises, if you will. And I really fell in love and saw my strength and my superpower was coaching and training, and then also helping other teams become successful, not just selling myself, but just like that whole aspect. And that's when it triggered for me, looking backwards after a few years, where I was like, that's what I want to do. That part of consulting and coaching and training, where it's like fixing and building all those fun parts of it. When things are running smooth, that's when I lose interest. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I want to move on to a new kind of challenge or project. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized I wanted to long term go into some kind of consulting. And then that's what triggered the MBA, because I was like, okay, I'm a dude with a marine biology degree that's been doing some sales.
Yeah, you
That's kind
need
of all over the
some
place.
cred.
Yeah, some cred, and then the business acumen to go with it. Like,
Yeah.
All those classes you take just filled in a lot of gaps of things I'd never seen before.
Now, a lot of the coaching you were doing, those were like call center type of things. These were people on the phone that were doing selling. No face-to-face stuff at that point.
No, well, so when I first started in the mortgage business, that was face to face. In fact,
For
I was
you, but not
trained.
the people you were training, right?
No. So in the very beginning, when I was selling it myself, it was all face to face.
Got it.
We were taught to like get a meeting as fast as possible. Don't do anything over the phone. Build relationships. Years later, I ended up doing everything over the phone, which I didn't think was possible. And then I learned it was possible. And then since then, I have pretty much only worked in verticals or with companies primarily that are over the phone, now over video. And
Right.
obviously it's a significantly different challenge when you can't see somebody, read their body language. You have to listen really well, and that's hard for a lot of salespeople.
Right. Okay. So I'll get back. I have plenty of questions for you. I get back to that. So you went off to MBA school. I'm very interested because I passed on my MBA coming out of college. I was like, I don't know if I really want to go the MBA track, but I went to law school because I felt I wasn't analytical enough and I wanted to be a better reader, and still not a better reader, but I'm definitely more analytical. But I'm curious to learn. This is obviously a ways back, so it might have changed now. What kind of sales things you learned during your MBA program?
I didn't really learn much. And when I did my MBA, it was later in life, right? So late 30s.
Right.
So I
Sure.
had a bunch of experience, and it was easy because a lot of the stuff that was discussed, I had experience in. So write a
Yeah,
paper
sure.
about or human resources, write a paper about, corporate culture,
And
and
you
that
had
kind of
been
stuff.
in
It's like,
those
oh,
places,
that's
right? You're
easy.
talking about kids that
Yeah.
came out of college and went there. They're like, they never,
They
yeah,
don't know. And a lot of the students in the classes I was in, if they went straight from bachelor's to master's, they were just like, they struggled because they didn't have experience. I just was like, okay, I've got all kinds of, I know what I want to chat about. Sales, not so much. There's some personality, some behavior. There was no sales specific class. My focus for my MBA and why I chose the school I went to, because they had a focus in operations and supply chain management. And that
okay.
operations management piece is what I really wanted to strategically calculate and figure out what it takes to run an operation, even a call center, versus like,
Hmm.
I think we need 10 more people. Instead, here's the math behind needing 10 more people.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. The reason I prefaced my question was there may be more, many of the MBA programs now may have those parts of their curriculum, but I really don't know. I know there's
Well, and
entrepreneurship
mine,
programs now. So
yeah, I think the entrepreneurship programs have that for sure. I mean, that was 4-ish years ago. So obviously some things changed. One thing that's different now than even then was bachelor's programs in professional sales that you can now get, where they're
yeah,
preparing you for professional selling career.
right. Yeah. Well, I think people realize that, what is it, the second oldest profession in the world, selling?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It drives everything.
Yep.
Drives everything. Okay. So take me through then, the whole process of what you're doing now and your book and, because you got your MBA, you said about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you launched your career coming at, I mean, you're like, I'm in, I'm here. You were already coaching
Sort
at that
of.
point, right?
No, so sort of. So I started the MBA process. I was doing a completely different line of work that has nothing to do with sales. That doesn't make any sense either with my degree, my marine biology degree either. And so I was doing that, and I was like, I want to get out of this line of work. Let me get my MBA. I want to do the consulting. Let me build into that. Halfway through my consulting, I connected with somebody I knew before. He made me an offer to come work for him and essentially be the in-house consultant, if you will, and do everything that I'm really good at internally in many different departments. And it was like, that's great. So I did that, finished my MBA, was there for 3 years. When that ended, then I dove into this, which has now been about 2.5 years
So
in
what did that
consulting.
company do?
That was helping people with student loan debt get
Oh, that
into
was the debt
programs to
company.
help with their payments. Yeah,
Got
so
it.
it was in a credit, helping people with credit card debt, and then later on with student loan debt.
Okay. So, unless you have some more comments about your life and story, I want to get into all the good stuff and the sales stuff that you're teaching everybody. And by the way, your book, which I assume is on Amazon, we'll put a
Yep.
link in the show notes. Selling with Authentic Persuasion, a real, wealth of, I mean, a real good primer for selling. Because that's
Yeah,
the problem. The authentic stuff, people nowadays see through everything.
yeah,
They
yeah, and
don't.
it's interesting too because what's fascinating to me, and this is just human psychology and behavior, is we see through, I'm just going to call it the gross stuff, right? The manipulating, the hard, the pressure sales, the
Right.
tricks, the tactics. Most people can identify those, but a lot of times emotionally they still want that thing that they're trying to buy, and so they
Right.
tolerate it, like the car,
Yeah.
right? So
Like a
people
car.
buy cars, they make the decision to buy a car based off of emotions. Very few people need a new car, maybe a used car, but you don't need a new car. But you want it emotionally for various reasons, whatever.
Right.
And then what happens is you're hoping someone's going to prove to you intellectually that it's a good decision and it makes sense. And
Right.
so that's what happens. And people go into those, even if you're dealing with somebody you don't want to deal with, if you're committed to that emotional decision, you're not going to back
You're going to
down.
put
You
up
might
with a
regret
lot.
it.
Yeah.
You're going to regret it 5 minutes later, but you're not going to back down before you get into that. And so what happens, and this is what I see a lot, and why the subtitle of the book is, transform from order taker to quota breaker, is what happens. And I'll take myself, for example, which for me, and then also I don't know how many hundreds of salespeople I've seen in companies over the years,
Yeah.
that most people, they have those experiences before stepping in the role of any kind of sales, and they go, I don't want to be like that person. That's gross and
Right.
terrible, and if
Yeah. It
that's what
turns
it
them
takes to
off.
win, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. So what happens? They go to the complete other end, which is great at building rapport. They can share some empathy. They really want to help people out, but they're more like an order taker. They're more of a doormat,
Right.
which is so they're too far at the other extreme. And then for me, what I found is there's a fantastic and successful place in the middle, which I've labeled authentic persuasion, which kind of describes it all. But it's where you're selling like a professional. So you're not crossing the line into manipulating, but you're
Right.
using persuasion to help the right people make the right buying decisions, and then doing that repetitively where it feels true for you, authentic for you.
Right. Well, I guess that's what true sales is, right? It's helping people to make a decision they should be making for themselves,
Mhm.
not convincing them to buy something they don't need. That's not sales. That's manipulation, like you said. But I guess it's really like the closing. I hate to use the word, but it's the closing skills that they're really missing. So you get the person on the other end of the spectrum, and they're all happy, I love you, whatever, and then you leave, and they don't have a sale, and they're like, well, why?
Yeah.
Why didn't you ask them? Ask them to sign or whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
and I guess that's what they're missing. A lot of these people, huh?
It is. And if I can, I'll share an interesting example
Yeah.
that
Stories are good.
of what it would be like in a different profession that we take as a profession. So imagine, this is, I always laugh when I even tell my own story. So imagine you break your arm and you go
Okay.
into the emergency room and you go to the doctor, they see you, they examine you, do the x-rays, come back and say, your arm is broken. It's a fracture right here. We're going to have to re-break your arm. We'll put a cast on it, and it's going to hurt for a while. We'll give you some pain meds. Here's a brochure on
Right.
how broken arms work and how to
Yeah.
fix it. And I'm going to send you a follow-up email with have the information, the pricing. And then what I'll do is I'll follow up with you next week. I'll give you a call, see if you've decided. I know you probably want to talk to somebody, maybe like your spouse or your boss. And you talk to them about it. Oh, by the way, if you decide to do this by next Friday, it's the end of the month. And so we're doing a discount. We do 20% off if you buy before the end of the month or the quarter. And,
Right.
just let us know. Here's my card.
Right.
And, we'll be in touch. I'll follow up with you next week.
Right. He
And
didn't
then the
leave
doctor
he
walks
left out
away.
the part like if you don't get back to me soon, your arm's going to be really fucked up.
Yeah,
So yeah.
none of that, right? And
Right.
so it's a ludicrous example, which is why I use it all the time, because that's not what
Makes
they
the
would
point.
do.
Yeah.
And the reason why they don't do that is because they're a professional. Now, they have the advantage, just like you as an attorney have the advantage of a professional actually meaning something, which is there's an oath, a code of conduct, there's some testing involved, there's a board, there's requirements, there's somebody keeping everyone in line, right? If that doctor did that thing in that example I just shared, that would be malpractice and they would be toast. That's
Clearly.
it. It's
Right.
really easy. They took a Hippocratic oath that says they're not going to do undue harm. And if they let somebody walk out like that without trying their hardest to get that person to agree to getting the arm fixed, it would feel like a failure professionally and personally to them as a medical professional. The
Right.
problem is in sales, there is no profession. There's no governing body. There's no testing.
Right.
There's nobody keeping everyone in check. And so what happens instead in that doctor example? Well, you go in, they do their process, they come back and they say, it's broken. We need to re-break it. We need to cast it. It's going to hurt. We're going to give you some pain meds.
Well,
Do you
we're
have
going to
any
prepare
questions
the
before we
ER.
begin?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Do you have any
Of
questions
course.
before we begin? No, hold on. This is going to hurt. I promise we'll get you on your way. And then we'll see you in 6 weeks. Get ready. And then they just assume it because they know that their duty as a professional is to help you. And so when you see sales that same way, when it's something I'm doing for you and with you instead of to you, then I'm here to help you. And then that close, right? That pushy part that people don't like at the end is actually not pushing them. It's pulling them to the solution that's going to
Right.
make them into a better place.
Well, a lot of it comes down to, though, psychology, right? Because the doctor and the patient in those situations have an expectation of how they're going to deal with each other, right? So, and the doctor knows that. So the problem with the salesperson is that they believe, and it may not be true, by the way, that the buyer or the potential customer, the prospect, or whatever we want to call them, right?
Yeah.
Does not have that expectation, that, thinks that you're trying to rip them off. And it's the good salespeople who have, I mean, it's not even conscious anymore when they get good at it, but they go in with the expectation that the doctor has, that I'm here, it's my obligation to help you make this decision, because I wouldn't be proposing it to you if it wasn't the right thing, for you to do. And there's a level of confidence that you have to portray to people. The authenticness definitely is probably 98% of the deal, right? Because if you believe it in your mind, people will start to. I know some guys in the insurance business, for example. We were talking about how they have some of the best salespeople in the world, because it is hard to sell, especially like life insurance. Forget it. Nobody wants it. It's very hard to sell. I know some guys where, and I've asked, because as an attorney, I work with a lot of these guys. You ask the clients, well, they tell you about the experience. They're like, when we were with Jason and he was helping us through the life insurance, oh my God, I felt like I could buy anything. Like, it's just the way you were, either through training or whatever. That's what's missing. And I think, like you're selling, what you're saying about all the authentic persuasion, people have to start, and maybe they need your help to do it, of course, to change that paradigm in their head. They should be approaching it from the doctor's standpoint. I'm not helping you by letting you go and listen to a brochure. And in life insurance case, you might die in a week. Now, there's other things. Obviously, you wouldn't suffer terrible loss if you waited a week. But still, you got to give them the opportunity to make a decision that's good for them, instead of saying, oh, well, here's a brochure, and,
Yeah.
look it over. And then if you like it, you can call me, maybe some questions. We'll think. And they dance around this stuff. And you see these people all the time, right?
Yeah. And I 100% agree what you said. I love it because, in that insurance example, when you make that mindset shift, which is what I work with a lot of clients, a lot of teams, a lot of individuals who they mean well, they want to help people. They just don't want to cross that line into what they think selling is.
Yeah. What are they going to
But in
think of me?
that life insurance example, again, that's a perfect example of what I always think about. And then what I always teach people think is, what is the worst case scenario? What happens if they don't buy from you? What could happen to their life? And again, I've had the benefit early on of dealing with people who are in foreclosure. I didn't think of myself as a salesperson. I had to learn really quickly that even if somebody's in a lot of trouble in their life, they still aren't going to make good decisions, because if they made good decisions, they wouldn't have gotten that place in the first, unless like there's some times where there's crazy circumstances. Otherwise, it's usually a series of choices. And so to get them unstuck takes a lot of effort. That's where I actually learned persuasion, like in the trenches. But I also learned what happens when I couldn't help somebody move forward. It meant them being homeless. It meant the sheriff coming at 10 o'clock and putting all their stuff on the curb, and then potentially living under a bridge. I saw that many times. And so my mind always goes there as the outcome if I don't help somebody in front of me. And then my pressure, if you will, comes from a completely different place. It comes from I care so much about you, I literally can't not help you buy, which is a totally different thing. And then the other part, going back to the doctor professional part, this is what I work with a lot of clients on too, is there's the mindset, there's the attitude, and that coming at it from that part, where that can be sensed. But then it's also the what you're saying too, which is setting those expectations, which is saying the things even a doctor says, even if you know they're a doctor and I'm a patient, the doctor will sit down and say, I'm going to do this exam based on what I see. I'm going to tell you what you should do. And then we're going to get you set up. Like they outline the conversation, the relationship, and the steps. A lot of salespeople, they just jump into and go, okay, I'm either going to sell you or not, but they don't understand the other person has no idea what's about, to happen in the conversation.
Right. Well, that's the difference between being a professional and just,
Correct.
I hate to use the term, just trying to sell shit. And look,
Yeah,
there are some professions where people throw enough up against the wall.
that's
They
it.
may work very hard and too hard and they make money and, they get through it and it fits their person. That's fine. Most people though are not comfortable with, they want to feel like they're doing good. They want to feel like the other person has this perception. I think they're really worried about the perception that the other person has. And I think, like what you said, what's the worst that can happen if you don't sell them? I think what's the worst that can happen if you do the right thing and they're offended then you couldn't help them anyway. Or maybe they're not really your friend. I mean, if they are your friends, before that, like what's the
But
worst? We're not going to throw a tomato at you. I mean,
yeah. And really it's about being clear on it. I will say I have forcefully told some people what they should be doing. And I give them the disclaimer that this isn't about me. Right. At the end of it's when I used to help people with credit card debt, I would tell people like, you need to do this. We need to sign you up. They're like, well, you're just trying to push me. It's no. Like when we hang up, this is what I would tell people. When we hang up this phone and I go home tonight, I don't have $50,000 in credit card debt at 29%.
right.
If you don't let me help you with this, you still have that debt and you're in trouble and you know that. And so this isn't about me. Like there's enough people in debt. I can talk to all of them. It's about
Yeah,
you.
there's always
And
more
and
people
I
to do
mean it.
business
That's
with.
the authentic piece, right? Because there's a lot of shady people who will say that kind of stuff, but they don't really mean it. And they're just trying to get the deal done. I honestly mean it. That's why the authentic piece comes even before the persuasion, right? A lot of people come to me and say, all right, what's the one question I can ask? How do I close deals? What's the best close I can use? I'm like, no, let's deal with you and your mindset and your authenticity first. Because once you do that, almost doesn't matter what you say because people will appreciate you as a different type of salesperson.
Yeah, well, there are no tricks. That's the secret,
No.
right? The secret is there are no secrets. Maybe 50 years
Don't
ago,
tell
people
anyone
used
that.
manipulated things. Yeah, I know, seriously.
Don't tell anyone
But the
that, Mitch. They
truth is,
won't buy
no,
the
but
book.
that's what the book's about, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's what you do. It's that if you are fixed, right, you fix them. So now people can't see through them because when they see through them, they see genuineness and they see
Mhm.
caring and they see, being a professional. And I don't remember what it was, but you're going to tell me what it is. You used an acronym in our last discussion when you're giving a presentation about, was it rapport?
What the REFU, the rapport, empathy, trust, hope, and urgency.
Yeah, you used some sort of an acronym. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, so
So,
yeah, and that's what it comes down to. So if they are now a professional who's authentic and cares about people, yeah, then it doesn't matter what you don't have to worry about. I need that sentence or what am I going to say? It all happens the right way, you
yeah,
know?
definitely in layers. I mean, there's a point at which you have to say the right things or watch out for pitfalls of things that you might be doing to trigger that. But that's not the first place to start, right? You need the foundation before you can start building the house.
Okay, so I'd love to talk about some what's the word? Some common mistakes people make, some advice you have, but do you have any like war stories? Do you have any like I was working with this company and this happened and we got this result? Good, not a bad ending. I mean, good things, whatever from your journeys.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it always goes that route. I mean, one of the things, and this is what I love about what I do, is most people throw together sales teams. They're hoping, if they find people who are good at sales and they just give them some leads, then they'll know what to do. And so it's generally not that way. Because if you want to scale, if you want it to be repetitive, otherwise you're going to have a lot of turnover, and that's usually a challenge. But I noticed one company I worked with, they were actually offshore and had a bunch of agents who had been in the campaign for years. And so I worked with them for 2 weeks and with their managers to help their managers actually see how to manage everybody. And, there were some people who didn't make it. There were some people who were like, wait a second, I don't want to be held accountable. I don't want to be here anymore. And that just
Right.
happens, right? It's not my
Yeah.
goal. I'm not there to like get people to run away screaming. But some people realize like, wait a second, I liked just collecting a check and playing salesperson, but I don't actually want to improve, right? They're just not open to it. But the great thing was after a few days, and then for the rest of that time period, everybody whose goal was to be doing 3 sales a day, enrollments in a day in the product they were selling, they were moving towards that and they were getting there. And there was like this momentum shift. And it was really that mindset, right? Instead of like, we're calling these people and we're, doing this to them. It's like, no, just help them, talk to them, care about them, and then help them, and then find a solution, and then don't stop. If you know you can help them, just don't stop. And it shifted because the culture there on that offshore call center is more service. And so it's much more, tends to be more order taking. And it was great because, the people they were selling to, they were helping.
Yeah. Do you find that really high performing salespeople are not the best at training other young salespeople?
No.
Like a different skill.
So it's a different skill, and it's not even like all of them, but here's the challenge with it is that we humans are very, very self-centered, and we think that everybody else it thinks like we do and exactly likes the things that we do, and that's it. It's just all of us, right? Even
Right.
myself.
It's human
And so
nature.
that's our default nature. Yeah,
Yeah.
that primal part of our brain that still thinks it's hundred thousands of years ago in a cave, only cares about our survival and procreation, and that's literally it. And so what happens is, if you're not careful, that's driving you. All of us, we all have that. And when somebody's really good in sales, especially if it comes more natural. I don't believe in a natural born salesperson. There could be someone who has like the charismatic side and that personality that might help.
That helps.
And
Right.
they've been selling slash hustling slash talking people into
Right.
stuff
They're a
since they were a
hustler.
kid.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it, Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. They've been selling and hustling people for over 10,000 hours since they were probably like 4, and they just didn't stop. And it's natural. It's
Yeah.
literally natural for them. The challenge is that they then just assume it's natural for everybody.
Right.
And the problem, it's like going to LeBron James right now and say, "Hey, LeBron, why don't you teach me how to dunk and shoot?" He's like, "Well, you just do it for 30 years and be born with some talents and put in a lot of work, 12 hours a day, and
Right.
do it for 20, 30 years, and you'll get there, right?" And
Right.
so that's why you don't see great players generally as coaches. I mean, usually they don't need to financially, but then
No, a
it's
lot of
also
players
time.
don't make it as a coach.
They don't. Very few
Yeah.
do,
It's a
right?
different
And
skill,
so
right?
it is. And
Yeah.
and a lot of the times, because it's so natural to them, they have a hard time either teaching other people what they do naturally or having any kind of tolerance for someone who just doesn't get it. Like, what do you mean you don't get it? Like, it's so easy. I see the matrix.
Right.
How can you not see the
They get
matrix?
frustrated. Right.
And that's the challenge. And again, it's a totally different skill as well. That's why I spend more of my time these days working with the leaders of teams. So sales managers and VPs, executives, team lead supervisors, because the standard thing in sales teams is, oh, you're good in sales, I'm going to promote you. Now you're a manager. But with
Right.
no training, not like,
Right.
hey, I'm going to put you through this like 6 months of leadership training. No, just go, just do what you do best with this other 9 people who also don't know what they're doing.
It's funny. That's like the worst in hindsight. That's like the worst thing a company could do. Let's take our best salesperson who's driving our sales out of sales and move him into something he knows nothing about and give him no training. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people use the excuse. They look and they go, "Oh, well, I mean, it comes natural to Jason. And it's
It'll
like
be
you
easy.
said, people have propensities, right? Their personality, whatever, they're hustlers, whatever. But if you don't do the 10,000 hours or the 30,000, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you're not going to get there either.
No.
LeBron James didn't like wake up. He's a good basketball player, never practiced, then went out to the NBA. He played a lot of basketball.
And still
I
does.
think people
And
miss
still,
that.
all of those stories like the Kobe's and the Michael Jordans and all these pros in any sport, doesn't matter. It could be Tom Brady, whatever.
Right.
They're
Lots and
in
lots of
early, they're
practice.
there late, they're practicing, they're thinking about it, they're living it, they're eating it, they're breathing it. And so, yeah, it's a different game when you're trying to manage somebody. And I'll tell you, here's the interesting thing. And I love that you added on like the training, like coaching, like training and mentoring and helping these leaders get better, because by the numbers, it totally makes sense even to take your top producer and put them into a leadership role. Because let's say somebody's doing, I don't know, we'll just take any kind of metric. I'm doing 20 sales a month
Okay.
as a good car salesperson. I move up. Okay, now I'm not getting those 20 sales. However, if I have a team of 10 people and those 10 people close 2 more sales a month than they are now because of my effort, now we're break even. Anything above that is gravy. So the numbers make sense.
As
It's
long as
the
you give them the
follow
training.
through. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what's missing. And that's
No, because
where
they
like the
think because
companies,
you're a good, yeah, they think because you're a good salesperson, you don't need the training. That's why we're
yeah,
picking you, Jason.
yeah,
What do we need to
yeah,
train you for? You've been selling 40 cars a month. Everybody sells 3. Well,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's unfortunate. Okay. So you mentioned here, so let's talk about some common mistakes that like people make that get in the way. I mean, I know it's all about being authentic and persuasion, but I would like
Mhm.
to know, like, what are the common things that you see that people do that are wrong?
One of the biggest, I'll say tells, because I was just thinking about poker. One of the biggest tells that I instantly see when it comes to order takers. And again, order taker is not a derogatory term. It's not like a permanent scarlet letter, like you're an order taker and you need to go find a job, doing something
Right.
else. It's more of a condition and state. Usually you look at the stats and you can tell someone's an order taker based on their closing percentage. But I honestly feel like that's a good base because that person can take that empathy and then be successful if that's where they're coming from. But the number one tell I always see is, I call it the death pause, which is when, here's the routine. And this is super important. If you're in sales or you're leading sales team, if you take this one thing and you listen for this and then you fix this, it will solve many things in the conversations. It will help them move forward. So here's the situation, right? So imagine, Mitch, you ask me a question, you're asking about the price, and then I go on, let's say I'm a standard salesperson and I go on this long rambling monologue that goes around in circles, that doesn't actually answer the question, that actually makes you more
Right.
scared than if you hadn't asked the question. And then at the end of my answer, I pause, because common courtesy, I'm going to pause. That's the polite thing to do. And then I'm going to give you a chance if you have more questions, right? It's just a nice thing to do. So I pause. Your brain now freaked out even more because my answer was probably crap, and scaring you. And if you asked one question, it's because you're scared. Otherwise, you would be swiping your credit card and paying, right?
Right.
Or signing on the dotted line.
Yeah.
And so
You're
your brain
resisting.
goes, what other questions do I have? Because I'm
Right.
scared, right? That's the thing. Again, if you haven't bought yet, it's because you're afraid of something.
Right.
Um, and so what does your brain do and your mouth? You, the non-buying customer, throw out another question, right? So
Right.
I, thinking I'm doing a great job because my job is to answer questions, and if I answer them all, I'm going to
Yeah. I
win.
mean, they
Right?
are
This is what I've
signs
been
of
taught.
interest, right? It shows
Yeah,
that you're
yeah, of course.
interested in buying.
Of course.
Okay. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
But what happens is then I answer another question. And then at the end I pause because it's the nice thing to do. And I was told, answer all their questions and then you'll win, right? When they run out of questions, there's no objections anymore. I'll win. The problem is that you keep giving that person a chance to ask a question. And every time they ask a question, that fear part of their brain is just going to dig in deeper and deeper. There's rarely ever the right answer. They're just looking for things. And you're never going to say always the right things. You're going to trigger it. And so what happens is that I call it that death pause, because it's the death by 1,000 punches, right? You are going to lose. They will eventually get you and they will walk away. And instead, the best thing to do is you answer their question like a professional and then just continue with whatever you were doing. Because most likely the question was triggered by something you asked that started getting real. Like if we're talking, I'm like, hey, Mitch, so I'm going to help you with this. What about this? What about this? All right. So the next part's the application. What's your social security number? Whoa, hold on, Jason. Let me, what is this going to cost? Like there's something that freaked you out. And so you just got to return to that question. Just go back to it and just keep moving forward and don't stop and don't leave that gap in there. Whenever I hear that gap, that pause, I know that person's just going to keep getting beaten and they're going to lose.
But that's something that you have to practice at.
You have to be aware of it. So the first part is being aware. That's where
Yeah.
call recordings, listening in, because most people won't believe it. It's like, no, I don't do that. Okay, here, listen to this. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh God, there it is again. Oh yeah. Oh, and then they hung up. Oh yeah, I could see it now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of all the stuff we do is consciousness. You're just nervous about this stuff. It's your first time. You don't realize you're just always nervous about it. You don't even hear yourself. Like these
Yeah.
people are shocked, right? They're shocked. They're like, I don't do that. Yeah, of course you
Yeah.
do.
Or they're just in the habit, or they just think they're doing the right thing, right? I'm giving you the opportunity to ask me questions like this podcast. I answer my questions. I try to keep them short. They're not always short here in our conversation. I have some longer stories, and then I pause. And
Yeah,
why? Because it's not my show, it's your show. And I want you to ask me more questions. Now, if I was afraid of you asking me questions, I would just steamroll through this, but you wouldn't even publish this episode because it would be garbage. So I pause. You hit me with another question.
right.
We'll see how I do. I don't know.
Right. Well, you're a polite guest though, because you give me openings to come in and say things. Some people I do have to like jump in the middle. Like, Jason, wait, let's back up, and I ask a question to really to break up the conversation. It's, nobody wants to listen to me or you talk for 50 minutes and now without we want to have a dialogue.
Unless they do want to hear me for a long time, then they can
probably
get the
do.
book on Audible. It's 5.5 hours long.
I had a comment from one guy like, dude, don't talk so much. Like, dude, it's my fucking show, I'm like,
yeah.
So
it's my
it's pretty
podcast.
funny.
I do whatever I want.
Yeah, exactly. Get your own podcast.
Get your own podcast, buddy.
Right. All right. What other common mistakes do people make? That was a good one.
That one's a really big one. One of the biggest things too is salespeople really focus on the sale. They focus on their part in the process, their little world, and they're not thinking long term. They're not thinking that whatever they're doing and selling is the beginning of something, right? So I sell you a car. That's the beginning of you owning that car. But now you own that car, right? If I sold you life insurance, that's the beginning of you having life insurance. But each day you've got to decide, do I still want to keep this or do I want to cancel it? So there's this whole like retention thing that happens. A lot of salespeople, they don't care. They just sell and they say whatever they need to say to get the deal. They don't set proper expectations, and then they hope to get paid, and then they move on to the next one, and they literally don't care, which is why in organizations, there's always a battle between the back end and the front end, the operations, the customer service, retention, and sales, because sales is usually self-centered on their commission, their money, and they just don't care what happens, even if they're throwing garbage over the wall. And the key is to set those right expectations. Now, what happens is a lot of salespeople, and again, this is tons of experience, so I'm not just picking on salespeople, because I've seen it, is a lot of salespeople are afraid of setting expectations and afraid of pointing out the things that might happen after somebody buys, because they don't want to lose the deal, because they're missing that confidence, because they're not professional. And so one of the biggest things, if you want to help your sales career and your company, is to set those right expectations and address buyer's remorse before you're done in your sales process, because everybody will have a flash of regret when they buy something. We all do it, unless it's small, like you're buying a pack of gum. That flash of regret, if it sucks, is very small, but otherwise it's there. And so when you're selling, one of the biggest things I always say, and I have it in the book and I train people on it, is set the right expectations, address it. Buyer's remorse is going to kick in. And so you want to talk to them about it instead of being afraid of it and hoping they just lose your number or don't call you back. Just talk about the feelings that person's going to have, because here's the cool thing. If I tell you, hey, you're going to buy this life insurance policy, and then here's what I know, over the next couple of days, you're going to think about it and you're going to regret it. You might even wake up at 2:00 in the morning in a cold sweat and go, why did I do this? I don't need this. I shouldn't pay for this. I have a friend who bought life insurance. They didn't even use it. And then they wasted that money, or so-and-so died, and then they couldn't even get it. Like, all these things flash in their head. So it happens to everybody. If you tell them that kind of stuff will happen, and I say, this will happen to you at some point, these thoughts are going to come in, call me. I'll reassure you. I can explain why it makes sense. Don't worry about it. It happens to everybody. When that does happen, when you do wake up at 2 a.m. in a cold sweat thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do? Then you'll say, wait, Jason told me this was going to happen.
Right.
That's
exactly.
Right. I made a right decision.
Yep.
I'll call him tomorrow. This is okay. So that's the difference in a professional to me, is setting that expectation. You're going to feel this. This is what's going to happen. Don't worry, it's normal, versus good luck.
Yeah, well, I think two things. One is it goes right to your medical example, right? If the doctor tells you, listen, you might have these symptoms because it's a side effect of what happens. Doesn't mean you're dying. Then you don't act like you're dying. But if he didn't tell you that, first thing you'd be like, oh my God, the doctor didn't tell me that. That must be bad. Or he would have told me that. And what am I going to, the whole thing.
Right.
But I think salespeople, especially the younger ones, are so afraid. They can't believe that they're actually making a sale to begin with. And subconsciously or subconsciously, they're like, I want to get the hell out of here with this sale before this person changes their mind. And a lot of times they do change their mind. They just do it later,
Yeah. So
always,
that's a big one. If somebody wants to have a long-term successful career instead of just like short-term success, but then all these cancels or refunds or whatever happens, then it's about setting that right expectation. And here's the thing, going back to your point of like, when you're in sales, there's moments where you've got somebody who wants to buy. You don't want to screw that up. The reason why is, even if you're amazing at sales, I think I'm pretty good at sales. I know some people who are really good at sales. You're still losing most of the time, right? If you're really good at sales, you might be closing 30%, 40%, depending on what kind of leads,
baseball, right?
Who you're talking, right? That's like baseball, right? So that means you're striking out 60, 70, 80. I know people who they're amazing, and amazing in their industry is 10%. That means they're losing 90% of the time, which then that's mental. That's so hard. That's why most people can't make it. But then when you have that 10%, you're so desperate because you've been punched in the face 9 other times or struck out 9 other times that you're just like, I don't want to blow this. So I'll just say whatever it takes. And then it's just bad.
Yeah. Because you haven't built any kind of rapport, any kind of relationship,
you're desperate for that 10%. And then you
haven't reinforced anything. Yeah. It's very common in the life insurance business because it's like we said, it's an intangible. It's very difficult to sell. Nobody wants it. You can ask 12 people, every one of them will say, why would you do that? And they have no background. They don't know anything about it. They don't know anything about you. It's like, one thing I hate soundbite financial planning, like on the radio. So, on TV, and you have these financial professionals, let's call them, but I'm going to get, I work with a lot of financial guys, so they're going to criticize me, but the ones like on the TV ones, they'll either talk to you for 2 seconds or they'll just read like, oh, well, Jason sent us an email and give you advice. They don't know you from Adam. They don't know your situation. And it is, forget about malpractice. I mean, it's dangerous to do things like that. And I hate it. My wife wants to get me crazy. She puts Susie Orman on the TV. I listen, I go nuts. And I know people love Susie Orman or whatever, but I've heard her give, and I've heard a lot of professionals give advice to somebody. And I go like, how could she say that? She doesn't know this person's situation. She hasn't done a fact finder and know about their family situation, their financial situation, what kind of debt they have, and this and that, what keeps them up at night. It's just not a good way to do things. And I think that, people don't, I don't know, it just gets under my skin. I forget why they don't.
I completely agree regarding her and others like that, in that frame where it's an incomplete picture. It's, here's an email, here's a question. Hey, should I invest in a 401k? Okay, here's why that's all you needed to make that kind of crystal ball decision.
Yeah, if you're maxing out your 401k, but you're running up your credit card debt and you got no money left at the end of the month, maybe it's not the best thing for you right now in your life.
Yeah. So, and I mentioned in the book, there's a chapter in there called Sales Malpractice, where because of this medical example, and I use that in the book a lot to help people understand, again, what a professional does, because we've all experienced doctors. So, we know what a professional is versus sales, which doesn't have a profession. So it's a little bit different. But in sales, and I learned this one early on in sales, especially in the mortgage business, when people just want to know the rate. Hey, what's my rate going to be? Well, I don't know. I got to pull your credit. I got to look at things.
You could lie to them and say it's going to be right.
Well, and that's what happens, right? And so sales malpractice, like medical malpractice, is prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. If I give you the prescription without doing my examination, without going through my due diligence, that's malpractice. In sales, that's sometimes called a bait and switch. What's my rate going to be? Oh, our rates right now are running at 4%. Okay, that sounds good. Pull credit. Oh, your rate's 5%. Well, why is that different? Well, because I was just throwing crap out there earlier, and now this is the truth. So that's the same thing that you're talking about with the financial stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So all right. So we've been on the mic for a while, and I'm taking up a lot of your time. But so that this is an entrepreneur's podcast. A lot of the people that listen in my audience are small business owners and startups. They're not working necessarily in teams and the kind of people you normally work with. But I think you and I both agree, we've said this before off the microphone, that if you own a business, you are a salesperson.
You
It's
are.
the only way you drive what you do. You don't make a product, put it in the window, and go sit in the back of the store. Maybe people do that and wait for people to come in and buy, right?
Maybe.
So, do you have some different advice? Are there things, if I'm a business owner, I'm getting started, that I should? Obviously, authentic persuasion is important all across the board,
Yeah.
but any other particular advice for the small business owner, the entrepreneur?
100%. Totally different advice, but still the same. So the sales stuff is important. I think one of the best things, and this goes to a different book, which has kind of been my go-to for a very long time, which is the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber.
Very
That's
good
my
book.
number one advice for small business owners, solopreneurs, even the people I work with that are on the smaller end of their business size or in their maturity, right? So it's early
Mhm.
on and they're still growing, is understanding who you are. Are you that technician? Are you that visionary? Or are you the manager in the framework? And people can look at that. I'm not going to go through in a lot of detail, but you want to understand. I mean, most technicians are the ones who start businesses because, hey, I'm good at building websites. Oh, I should just go into my own, start my own company building websites. That's great.
Right.
Except that's one piece of a business. You also have to do sales. You have to do marketing. So the first part is being aware of who you are, what you're good at, and then filling in the rest. If you're a technician building websites, if you want to succeed in business, even if you don't want to grow that much, you need to have somebody doing the sales, or you've got to get good at sales and you've got to
Right.
do it. Now,
And if
a lot
you're
of
right, if
times
it's
what
not your
happens,
wheelhouse, maybe you do need to bring someone in, right?
or what I see, and this is also, this might be applicable to some people listening or watching, is you I'm great at building websites. I'm going to go start a web design company. Great. And because you're passionate about it, because you know it and you know how to talk about it, you're getting sales because you're actually good at it. Because you can talk, it's your baby, right? Everyone can talk
Right.
about how
You're
cute their baby
passionate
is and
about
sell
it.
their baby, right? Yeah,
Right.
they're passionate about it. So they have that passion. Then what happens? They go, I'm growing, I'm busy. I want to have a sales team do this so I don't have to do this anymore. Hire salespeople. You're good at sales. We design websites. Go find some clients. The problem is that they're not training, they're abdicating sales and sales development to somebody else. And the hardest part for that founder salesperson who's also the technician is to build scripts, build processes, build training, actually give their people a chance at being successful. Where I help a lot of companies with that part because they know they want to. And usually, what happens by the time people talk to me, founders and small business owners, they've gone through a bunch of salespeople who have come and gone because
Yeah.
they were hoping they knew what to do for them, and
Right.
it doesn't work that way. And no one can
No.
sell. No one thinks your baby is as cute as you do. So no one's going to sell it with the passion you have, and no one's going to care as much as you do. And so you really have to build way more stuff than you might think when you're small for that team if you want to have a chance at succeeding in sales.
Yeah. And you're so far removed from what you really were good at that point, you don't even realize you think you're good at everything. It's
Yeah.
very common. Business owners are they're in a business, it's doing well. They're good at whatever it is that business does, but
Yep.
that doesn't mean that they're good at business in general. And then there's a shift or they sell the business or whatever it is and they go and they struggle to be
Yeah.
successful in other business because they don't talk to guys like you and they don't do the research. They weren't used to learning about selling and all that because it was working for them in that particular business because they somehow, like you said, their personality, whatever clicked in whatever they were doing. But it's not always transferable to the next business. Matter of fact, I know very few people. I know some people that are very good setting up businesses, growing the businesses, selling them, right? And they move on to the next business, but a lot of people are not.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I would say just really quickly, and anybody who wants to talk about this more, let me know. I'm happy to chat and give some advice on this side. But also being aware if you're small, if you're a founder, you're growing a team, hiring your first salesperson is understanding what type of salesperson you want and that you can afford. So do you want the veteran who knows what they're doing, who's going to want a big salary, they're going to want a big commission, but probably be completely untrainable and want to do everything their way, which might end up being a square peg in a round hole? You won't have to manage them, but I rarely ever see that person succeed. Or do you want somebody who's green and new to sales, who's going to be cheap for you, but you're going to have to babysit them and hold their hand for a long time? But then you're going to have somebody who knows your way, right? Then you've raised someone into your business, and then you have what you want. And then the third category is that entrepreneurial salesperson, that salesperson who's more of the hustler, who's willing to be flexible, who's willing to take direction, but also learn and grow. They will also not be with you very long, because once they figure it out and be good, they'll be like, oh, I'm good at this, I'm going to might start my own business. And that's okay too. You might just only have them for 6 or 9 months or 12 months and get some momentum and then move on. So you've got to be aware of what you want and what you're willing to invest in time and money, and then pick smartly. And none of those things are right or wrong. You just got to be conscious. Most founders, owners, they don't have any clue of who they're hiring or why. And they generally make just the wrong choices for their investment of time and energy.
Right. And they go in circles for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, I thank you very much. The book is Selling with Authentic Persuasion: Transform from Order Taker to Quota Breaker. And people can get the book on Amazon, right? And watch for you. You speak around on Zoom all over the place. And I thank you for spending time with me today.
I appreciate it, Mitch. And I hope this helps. And I love the stuff that you're doing with the show. So thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Jason.